play Beethoven and you're mine." Eleanor Ashford didn't know why she said it. The words escaped her mouth before she could stop them. The one-armed security guard froze mid-note, his bow hovering over her grandfather's priceless Stradivarius. The empty concert hall swallowed the silence between them. He turned slowly. Those storm-gray eyes held no fear, no shame, just a challenge. "That's not how you earn a musician, Ms. Ashford." His voice was calm. "That's how you insult one." He set down the violin and walked past her into the darkness. Eleanor stood alone on the stage, her heart pounding, her world tilting. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the best decision. "Comment your city, let's see how far this story travels tonight." Eleanor chased him. Her heels echoed through the empty corridor like gunshots. The one-armed security guard moved fast for a man who looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Wait!" she called. "Marcus, wait!" He didn't stop. He pushed through the service door and disappeared into the stairwell. Eleanor caught the door before it closed. "I didn't mean it like that. Please." Marcus paused on the landing below. He didn't turn around. "How did you mean it, Ms. Ashford?" "I don't know. I heard you playing and I just—" She struggled for words. "I've never heard anything like that. Not in 30 years of running this hall. You've been watching me." It wasn't a question. "The security cameras, 3 nights ago. I saw you play Paganini." Now he turned. His face was unreadable in the dim emergency lighting. "And you thought you'd come down here and make some clever comment. See if the crippled janitor could perform on command? You're not a janitor, you're the night security guard. Same difference to someone like you." The words hit harder than Eleanor expected. She descended 2 steps toward him. "Someone like me. Rich, powerful, born into everything I had to bleed for." His voice carried no bitterness, just exhaustion. "You don't know what it costs to play that violin, Ms. Ashford? You don't know what I've lost? Then tell me." "Why? So you can feel good about yourself, write a check to ease your conscience." "Because my grandfather believed in you." Marcus flinched, the first crack in his armor. "Theodore Ashford gave up on me 15 years ago." "My grandfather never gave up on anyone he saw true talent in. He pushed them away because he was afraid of how much he cared." Eleanor took another step down. "I should know. He did the same thing to me." The stairwell fell silent. Marcus studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there made something shift in his expression. "Your grandfather was wrong about you," he said quietly. "I heard recordings of you playing when you were 12. You had something special. He told me I wasn't good enough." "He lied." Marcus turned away. "Good night, Ms. Ashford." "Eleanor." He paused at the door. "My name is Eleanor, and I'm not done talking to you, Marcus Chen." 3 hours earlier, Eleanor had wanted to burn this building to the ground. Vincent Drake had made sure of that. The emergency board meeting had been an ambush. Eleanor walked in expecting quarterly reviews. She walked into a firing squad. Attendance down 42%. Vincent slid a folder across the table. Donations down 37%. Operating costs up 15%. "We've weathered downturns before," Eleanor said. "This isn't a downturn. This is a death spiral." Vincent stood buttoning his designer jacket. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I move that we begin negotiations with Whitmore Development for the sale of Ashford Symphony Hall." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." Vincent smiled, that smile she'd come to hate, sympathetic, reasonable, lethal. "This building is worth $80 million to developers. We can distribute the proceeds to shareholders, establish a small foundation in Theodore's name, and everyone walks away comfortable. Everyone except the musicians, the audience, the community my grandfather built this for." "Sentiment doesn't pay bills, Eleanor. Neither does greed, Vincent." The room went quiet. Vincent's smile hardened. "I have 4 votes for my motion." He gestured to his allies around the table. Margaret, Richard, the rest of you, we only need 2 more to proceed. Margaret Wilson, 82 years old, and Theodore Ashford's oldest friend, spoke for the first time. Theodore would roll over in his grave. Theodore is dead, Vincent replied, and his granddaughter is running his legacy into the ground. Eleanor slammed her palm on the table. This meeting is adjourned. You can't just, I can, I'm still CEO. She gathered her papers. You want to sell my grandfather's hall? You'll have to remove me first. Vincent's eyes glittered. That can be arranged. After the meeting, Eleanor had locked herself in her office. She'd poured a whiskey, then another, then a third. Theodore Ashford's portrait watched her from the wall. Those stern eyes, that disapproving frown. Even in death, he found ways to make her feel like a failure. What do you want from me? She asked the painting. I've given everything to this place. My marriage, my friendships, my whole damn life. The painting didn't answer. It never did. At 11 p.m., her phone buzzed. Security alert. Motion in the main concert hall. She almost ignored it. Probably just a cleaning crew running late. Then she heard it. Music. Faint but unmistakable. Floating up through the vents like a ghost. Eleanor set down her glass and followed the sound. The concert hall was dark except for a single work light on stage. Eleanor stood in the shadows of the upper balcony looking down. Marcus Chen stood at center stage. His empty left sleeve was pinned neatly at the shoulder. In his right hand, he held a violin bow. Under his chin, cradled like a child, was her grandfather's Stradivarius. The instrument hadn't been played in 23 years. It was supposed to be locked in a display case. Museum piece. Memorial. Untouchable. Marcus drew the bow across the strings. The sound that emerged made Eleanor grab the balcony rail. It was Paganini. Caprice No. 24. The piece that had broken more violinists than any other. 24 variations of impossible technicality. Most professionals with 2 hands couldn't master it. Marcus Chen was playing it with 1 arm. His technique was unlike anything Eleanor had ever seen. He'd modified his grip, his posture, his entire approach. The bow danced across the strings with a fluidity that defied physics. But it wasn't the technique that made Eleanor's breath catch. It was the emotion. Every note carried weight, pain, loss, longing, hope. The music wasn't a performance, it was a confession. Years of grief poured through that instrument, transformed into something achingly beautiful. Eleanor found herself crying. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried. When the final note faded, Marcus stood motionless. His shoulders trembled. His head bowed. Eleanor descended from the balcony. Her heels on the marble floor announced her approach. Marcus's head snapped up. For one instant, she saw raw vulnerability in his eyes. Then the walls slammed back into place. That's when she said it. Play Beethoven and you're mine. The stupidest words she'd ever spoken. A clumsy attempt at connection that came out like an order, like something her grandfather would have said. Marcus's expression went cold, and now here they were in a stairwell at midnight, 2 strangers orbiting each other's damage. Coffee. Marcus turned at Eleanor's voice. She stood in the doorway of the security station holding 2 cups from the break room. It's terrible coffee, she added, but it's hot. He studied her for a moment, then took one of the cups. Thank you. Can we start over? I said something stupid. I'm not usually that imperious. I was going to say clumsy, but sure, imperious works. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Eleanor sat. You play like someone who's lost everything, she said. How does that happen to a man who was supposed to conquer the world? Who told you I was supposed to conquer the world? My grandfather's notes. I found them after he died. She met his eyes. He wrote that you were the most naturally gifted violinist he'd ever taught. He said you had the kind of fire that could either illuminate or destroy. Marcus's jaw tightened. He never told me that. He never told anyone anything kind. He showed it through his actions. The fact that he kept mentoring you, kept pushing you, that was his love language. His love language nearly broke me. It did break me. Eleanor looked down at her coffee. I was 12 when he told me I'd never be good enough. I haven't touched a piano since. That's a tragedy. What happened to you is a tragedy. I just made a choice. So did I. Marcus set down his cup. My wife died 10 years ago. Cancer. She was a cellist, brilliant, beautiful, impossible. After she was gone, I had a 2-year-old daughter with the same genetic condition that killed her mother. Sophie. He looked surprised that she knew the name. I read your personnel file, Eleanor admitted. It didn't mention any of this. Because none of this belongs in a personnel file. It belongs in the past. But you still play, at midnight, in secret. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Sophie's never seen me perform. Not really. She was too young before Margaret died. After the accident. The accident? He touched his empty sleeve. Factory. 5 years ago. Machine malfunction. I was trapped for 6 hours before they cut me free. His voice was flat. Clinical. The doctors said I'd never play again. They were mostly right. What I heard tonight wasn't mostly. That's stubbornness. Desperation. Years of figuring out workarounds. He shook his head. It's not real playing. It's a shadow of what I used to be. Shadows don't make people cry, Marcus. He looked at her sharply. You cried. For the first time in years. Eleanor leaned forward. Do you understand how rare that is? How special you played that piece with one arm and made me feel something I thought I'd forgotten how to feel. And what was that? Hope. The word hung between them. Marcus turned away, staring at the bank of security monitors. Empty hallways, dark rooms, a building full of ghosts. My daughter is sick, he said quietly. The pulmonary condition she inherited, it's progressing. She needs surgery, specialized treatment in Geneva. The cost is... He trailed off. How much? More than I'll make in 20 lifetimes. How much, Marcus? $380,000. Eleanor's breath caught. My God! She's 14 years old. She plays cello like her mother. She practices every day even when she can barely breathe. His voice cracked. She dreams of performing in a real concert hall someday. A real audience. She's never had that. Why are you telling me this? Marcus turned back to face her. Because you asked what happened to me. This is what happened. I lost my wife. I lost my arm. I'm about to lose my daughter. And I clean toilets and guard doors because that's what fathers do when the world takes everything else. Eleanor stood. She walked to the window overlooking the empty concert hall. There's a foundation, she said. The Theodore Ashford Foundation. My grandfather established it to help musicians in crisis. It's been dormant for years, but the money is still there. I'm not a charity case. No, you're exactly the kind of artist my grandfather created that foundation for. She turned. Sophie qualifies. Talented young musician facing medical crisis. That's literally the mission statement. Marcus's face hardened. I won't take handouts. It's not a handout. It's what the foundation exists for. You control that foundation. I'm on the board. I'd recuse myself from any decision about Sophie. It would be completely legitimate. And completely humiliating. Eleanor crossed the room and stood directly in front of him. Is your pride worth more than your daughter's life? Marcus flinched like she'd slapped him. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. You know that better than anyone. Eleanor's voice softened. Let me help you. Not because I pity you. Because my grandfather would have wanted it. Because that's what this hall is supposed to be for, not corporate board meetings and donation galas, but people like you and Sophie. Marcus was silent. His jaw worked. I need to think about it. Of course. And I'm not making any promises about playing again, publicly or otherwise. I'm not asking for that. Then what are you asking for? Eleanor considered the question. Honestly, I don't know. I walked into this hall tonight wanting to burn it down. I heard you play and something changed. She moved toward the door. I think you reminded me why any of this matters. Because of music. Because of what music means. Connection. Beauty. Truth. She paused in the doorway. My grandfather used to say that one genuine performance was worth more than 100 perfect ones. I didn't understand what he meant until tonight. Marcus watched her go, his expression unreadable. Ms. Ashford. She turned back. Eleanor. Eleanor. He seemed to taste the name. Thank you. For the coffee. And for listening. Thank you for playing, even if you didn't know anyone was watching. She left him there surrounded by security monitors and ghosts holding a cold cup of coffee and the weight of an impossible choice. The next morning, Eleanor received 2 phone calls. The first was from Vincent Drake. I've scheduled a full board vote for Friday, he said without preamble. The sale motion will pass, Eleanor. You should start preparing your resignation. The hell I will. 8 votes. I have 8 votes confirmed. You need 7 to block me. You don't have them. Eleanor gripped the phone tighter. How did you get to Richard? Richard is a businessman. He understands that emotional attachment to a dying institution is foolish. My grandfather trusted him. Your grandfather is dead. Vincent's voice turned silky. Accept reality, Eleanor. By this time next week, Ashford Symphony Hall will belong to Whitmore Development. Fight me, and I'll make sure you leave with nothing. Cooperate, and I might find a place for you in the new organization. Go to hell! Friday, Eleanor. I'll see you there. The line went dead. Eleanor stared at the phone, her mind racing. 8 votes. She needed 7 to block the sale. Margaret would support her. Who else? Before she could begin strategizing, her phone rang again. Ms. Ashford. The voice was strained, scared. It's Marcus. It's Sophie. She collapsed at school. They're taking her to County General. Eleanor grabbed her coat. I'm on my way. The hospital waiting room smelled like despair. Marcus sat rigid in a plastic chair, his single hand clenched into a fist. He looked up when Eleanor burst through the doors. You came. Of course I came. She sat beside him. What happened? Her lungs. They're failing faster than the doctors expected. His voice was hollow. They say she needs the surgery now, not in 6 months. Now. Then we get her the surgery now. With what money I have $12,000 saved. $12,000. The foundation takes 6 to 8 weeks to process grants. He laughed bitterly. Sophie doesn't have 6 to 8 weeks. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. There has to be a way. There isn't. I've spent 10 years learning there isn't. Marcus's composure cracked. She's 14 years old. She's never performed in a real concert. She's never fallen in love. She's never done anything except fight to breathe and practice her cello and believe that somehow things would get better. Marcus. And I can't save her. His voice broke completely. I promised Margaret I would protect her. I promised Sophie she'd be okay. And I can't save her. Eleanor watched this proud, strong man fall apart, and something inside her shattered too. She thought about the board meeting on Friday, about Vincent Drake and his 8 votes, about the building she'd spent her life protecting. None of it mattered, not compared to this. Yes, you can, she said. Marcus looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. What? I have money. Personal money. Enough to cover the surgery. No, absolutely not. Marcus. I said no. He stood pacing like a caged animal. I won't take your money. I won't owe you. I won't. This isn't about you. Eleanor stood too, grabbing his arm. This is about Sophie. This is about a 14-year-old girl who deserves a chance to live. Your pride doesn't get to kill her." The words echoed through the waiting room. Other families turned to stare. Marcus stood, frozen, tears streaming down his face. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't take charity. It's all I have left, my dignity, my independence. If I lose that—" "You'll have Sophie." Eleanor's voice softened. "You'll have your daughter. Isn't that worth more than pride?" The door to the treatment area opened. A doctor emerged, his expression grim. "Mr. Chen, your daughter is asking for you. We've stabilized her, but we need to discuss next steps urgently." Marcus wiped his face roughly. He looked at Eleanor, really looked at her, and something passed between them. An understanding. A surrender. "Will you wait?" he asked. "As long as it takes." He nodded once, then followed the doctor through the doors. Eleanor sank back into the plastic chair. Her phone buzzed another message from Vincent Drake. She ignored it. On Friday she might lose her grandfather's hall, her career, everything she'd worked for. Right now, none of that mattered. She had just met a man who would lose everything, had lost everything, and still found a way to keep going. Still found a way to make music in the darkness. If Marcus Chen could play Paganini with one arm, she could find a way to save his daughter. She had to. Because somewhere in that hospital room, a 14-year-old girl was fighting for her life. And Eleanor Ashford was done watching good people suffer while she worried about quarterly reports. Her phone buzzed again. She turned it off. Let Vincent Drake have his votes. Let the board have their meeting. Some things were more important than buildings. Some things were worth losing everything for. 2 hours passed before Marcus emerged from behind those doors. Eleanor had counted every minute. She'd watched families come and go. She'd seen a young mother collapse into her husband's arms after receiving news she couldn't bear. She'd watched an elderly man wheel his wife out in a chair, both of them smiling through tears. The hospital was a theater of human drama, and Eleanor had never felt more like an outsider. When Marcus finally appeared, his face told her everything. The exhaustion had deepened. The fear had hardened into something else, determination maybe, or the kind of resignation that comes when you've run out of options. "She's stable," he said, lowering himself into the chair beside Eleanor. "For now." "What did the doctor say?" "She needs the surgery within 3 weeks. Any longer, and the damage to her lungs could be permanent." He stared at the floor. "They're transferring her to the cardiac wing for monitoring. She'll be here at least a week." "Can I see her?" Marcus looked up surprised. "You want to see Sophie?" "If she's up for visitors, and if you're okay with it." He studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he was looking for, he seemed to find it. "She asked about you, actually." "Me? She doesn't even know me." "She knows you're the woman who runs the Symphony Hall. The one with the fancy office and the grandfather who used to be famous." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She's been asking questions ever since I mentioned I work there." "What kind of questions?" "Whether the acoustics are really as good as the recordings suggest. Whether the Stradivarius in the lobby is real or a replica. Whether the CEO is as scary as people say." He paused. "She's curious about you." Eleanor felt something warm spread through her chest. "I'd like to meet her. Properly." Marcus stood. "Come on, then." They walked through the hospital corridors together, passing nurses and doctors and families in various states of hope and despair. Eleanor was acutely aware of Marcus beside her, the way he moved with quiet dignity, despite everything, the way other people unconsciously made room for him without realizing why. Sophie's room was on the 4th floor at the end of a hallway painted in cheerful colors that felt almost offensive given the circumstances. Marcus paused outside the door. "She doesn't know how bad it is," he said quietly. "I've told her about the surgery, but not about the timeline. Not about the money. You're protecting her." "I'm her father. That's my job." Eleanor nodded. "I won't say anything. Marcus pushed open the door. The girl in the bed was smaller than Eleanor had expected. 14 years old, but she looked younger, thin and pale, with dark hair spread across the pillow, and her mother's eyes looking out from her father's face. Oxygen tubes ran to her nose, and monitors beeped steadily beside her. But when Sophie Chen saw Eleanor Ashford walk through the door, her face lit up like Christmas morning. "Oh my God! Dad, you didn't tell me she was coming. I didn't know myself until about 30 seconds ago." Sophie struggled to sit up, wincing slightly at the movement. Marcus was at her side, immediately adjusting pillows, checking the monitors, fussing in the way that only parents can fuss. "Dad, stop, I'm fine." Sophie waved him away and turned her attention to Eleanor. "You're really her, the CEO lady." "Eleanor Ashford." She extended her hand. "And you must be Sophie." Sophie shook it with surprising firmness. "Your grandfather was Theodore Ashford. The Theodore Ashford. Dad used to tell me stories about studying with him." "Only the good ones," Marcus interjected. "There were good ones." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "A few, buried under all the yelling and the impossible standards." Marcus settled into the chair beside Sophie's bed. "Your grandfather was a complicated man." "That's the polite way of putting it." Eleanor pulled up another chair. "Sophie, your father tells me you play cello." "Like Mom." Sophie's voice softened. "She was amazing. I've seen the videos." "She was," Marcus confirmed. "Better than me, though she never believed it." "Dad says I have her hands." Sophie held them up, long fingers, elegant joints. "He says that's why the cello chose me instead of the violin." "Instruments don't choose people," Marcus said. "That's romantic nonsense." "Then why did the violin choose you?" "It didn't choose me. I chose it because it was the smallest instrument I could afford when I was 7. Sophie rolled her eyes at Eleanor. "He always does this, pretends everything was practical when really he's the most romantic person I know." Romantic isn't paying rent. Romance is playing Paganini alone in an empty concert hall at midnight. Marcus went still. Sophie's eyes widened. "Dad, I didn't mean... How do you know about that?" Sophie bit her lip. "Mrs. Patterson showed me the video." "What video?" Eleanor felt her stomach drop. She'd forgotten about the security footage. The cameras recorded everything. "Someone posted it online," Sophie said quietly. "Mrs. Patterson? She's my music teacher at school. She saw it and recognized you. She showed me yesterday before I got sick." Marcus's face had gone pale. "Posted it online where?" "YouTube. TikTok. It's everywhere, Dad." Sophie reached for his hand. "It's beautiful. You're beautiful. I didn't know you could still play like that." "Who posted it?" Eleanor knew the answer before Sophie said it. The cold dread in her gut confirmed it. "I don't know. Some account called Ashford Insider. The video has like 2 million views." Marcus turned to Eleanor. His expression was controlled, but she could see the fury beneath. "Did you know about this?" "No, I swear to you, Marcus, I had no idea." "But the footage came from your security system." "Yes, but I didn't..." Eleanor stopped. Her mind was racing. Who had access to the security recordings? The IT department, building management, and board members with the right clearance. Vincent Drake. "I think I know who did this," she said slowly. "And I think I know why." Marcus was already standing. "Who?" "Vincent Drake. He's been trying to remove me as CEO for years. He wants to sell the hall to developers." Eleanor's hands had balled into fists. "He's been looking for anything he can use against me. If he found out I've been spending time with you..." "So this is your fault." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. "Dad," Sophie protested. "She comes into my life, digs into my past, makes promises about foundations and money, and now my face is all over the internet." Marcus was pacing now, his single arm gesturing sharply. "Do you have any idea what this does to me, to Sophie?" "Marcus, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't make 2 million strangers stop watching the worst moment of my life." "The worst moment?" Eleanor stood. "You were playing Paganini like a master. How is that the worst moment?" "Because I was alone." Marcus's voice cracked. "Because I play in empty rooms at midnight. Because I can't bear for anyone to see what I've become. Because every note is a reminder of everything I lost, and now the whole world gets to watch me fall apart." The room fell silent except for the steady beep of Sophie's monitors. Sophie was crying, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Marcus saw his daughter's face and the rage drained out of him. He crossed to her bed and took her hand. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry. This isn't your fault." "It's not her fault either." Sophie looked at Eleanor. "She didn't post the video, Dad." "We don't know that." "I know it." Sophie's voice was firm despite the tears. "Look at her face. She's as upset as you are." Marcus didn't look at Eleanor. His eyes stayed fixed on his daughter. "I need some air," he said. "I'll be back in a few minutes." He walked out without another word. Eleanor stood awkwardly by the door, uncertain whether to follow him or stay. Sophie solved the dilemma for her. "Sit down, please." Eleanor sat. "He's not really angry at you," Sophie said. "He's angry at himself." "For what?" "For playing, for getting caught, for feeling something." Sophie adjusted her oxygen tube. "Dad's been hiding for so long he forgot that hiding isn't living. That's very wise for a 14-year-old. Mom used to say it, before she died." Sophie's eyes grew distant. She made Dad promise he'd keep playing, keep performing. She said music was his soul, and he couldn't let it die just because she did. But he stopped anyway. He had to. I was 2 when she died, sick all the time. He couldn't tour or perform, or even teach regular lessons. Sophie smiled sadly. "He gave up everything for me. His career, his arm, his whole life." His arm. The factory accident. He was working double shifts to pay my medical bills. 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Sophie's voice dropped. The machine malfunctioned because he was too tired to notice the warning signs. He was trapped for 6 hours before they cut him free. Eleanor felt sick. "He never told me how it happened." "He doesn't talk about it. He just says accident and changes the subject." Sophie looked at her directly. "But I know the truth. He lost his arm because of me." "That's not." "It is true. I've done the math. The medical bills, the extra shifts, the exhaustion." Sophie's chin trembled. "I'm the reason my dad can't play anymore." "Not really." "Sophie, listen to me." Eleanor leaned forward. "Your father made choices. Difficult, painful choices. But they were his choices. He chose to work those shifts. He chose to put you first. That's not your fault, that's his love." "His love cost him everything." "No. His love saved you. And you're still here, which means it was worth it. Every sacrifice, every lost opportunity worth it." Sophie wiped her eyes. "You really believe that?" "I believe your father does, and that's what matters." They sat in silence for a moment. The monitors beeped, the fluorescent lights hummed. Outside the window, the city continued its indifferent motion. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie said finally. "Anything. Why do you care about me and Dad, I mean? You're the CEO of a symphony hall. We're nobody." Eleanor considered the question. She'd been asking herself the same thing for days. 3 nights ago I was ready to give up. I was sitting in my office convinced that everything I'd worked for was about to be destroyed. She paused. "Then I heard your father play. And something shifted." "Shifted how?" "I remembered why my grandfather built that hall. Not for profit or prestige, but for moments exactly like that. Raw, honest, beautiful moments that remind us we're human. Dad does that, Sophie agreed. Even when he's just practicing at home. The music changes everything. I want to help you, both of you. Not because I pity you or want something in return, but because I think this is what I'm supposed to do. Sophie studied her face. You're different than I expected. What did you expect? Someone cold, businesslike. Dad always talks about rich people like they're a different species. Maybe we are, but that doesn't mean we can't learn. The door opened. Marcus stood in the entrance, his expression unreadable. Eleanor, can I speak with you outside? Sophie squeezed Eleanor's hand. Go easy on her, Dad. I like her. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He held the door open and waited. Eleanor stepped into the hallway. The door closed behind her. I made some calls, Marcus said without preamble. You were right. The video was posted from an account linked to Reynolds Records' IP address. Vincent Drake. Possibly. But it doesn't matter who specifically did it. What matters is that someone in your organization violated my privacy, and now my face is everywhere. I'll find out who. I'll have them fired. And that will undo the 2 million views, the comments. The people who now know exactly where I work and what I look like. Marcus shook his head. You can't unring this bell, Eleanor. No, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. How? By hiring more security, by locking down the footage. He laughed bitterly. The damage is done. By tomorrow, every media outlet in the city will be running stories about the one-armed janitor who secretly plays violin like a master. They'll dig into my past, find out about Margaret, find out about Sophie. I won't let that happen. You can't stop it. Watch me. Something in her tone made him pause. He studied her face, really looked at her for the first time since he'd stormed out of Sophie's room. Why does this matter so much to you? Because it's my fault. Because Vincent Drake is using you to get to me. Because... She stopped searching for words. Because I've spent my whole life playing it safe, following rules, protecting myself from exactly this kind of mess. And I'm tired of it. Tired of what? Of being careful. Of being proper. Of watching from the sidelines while good people suffer. She met his eyes. Your daughter is in that room fighting for her life. You've sacrificed everything for her. And some corporate vulture is trying to use your pain as a weapon against me. So this is about Vincent Drake. No. This is about doing the right thing for once in my goddamn life. Marcus was silent. The hospital corridor hummed around them, distant conversations, rolling gurneys, the omnipresent beep of monitors. I owe you an apology, he said finally, for what I said in there, about this being your fault. You were upset. You had every right to be. Being upset doesn't excuse cruelty. He exhaled slowly. Sophie's right. You didn't post that video. And even if your organization is responsible, you're not Vincent Drake. No, I'm the person he's trying to destroy. Then we have something in common. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. I suppose we do. They stood in the corridor, two people bound together by circumstance and shared enemies. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was something. I need to get back to Sophie, Marcus said. She worries when I'm gone too long. Of course. I should go anyway. I have a board meeting to prepare for. The vote on Friday. You know about that. The janitor's talk. We know more than most people realize. A ghost of his old humor flickered across his face. Building maintenance is the nervous system of any organization. And what are the janitors saying about my chances? That Vincent Drake has the votes, that you're going to lose. They might be right. Are you going to fight anyway? Eleanor thought about the question. Thought about her grandfather's portrait watching from the wall. Thought about Sophie in that hospital bed dreaming of concerts she might never perform. Thought about Marcus playing Paganini in an empty hall, pouring his grief into music that no one was supposed to hear. "Yes," she said. "I'm going to fight." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then I hope you win." "Thank you." She turned to go, then paused. "Marcus." "Yes." "The foundation grant. For Sophie's surgery. I'm pushing it through as an emergency case. The board meets tomorrow." "I told you." "I know what you told me, but I'm doing it anyway. Consider it my apology for the video disaster." She held up a hand before he could protest. "Your daughter needs that surgery. The foundation exists for exactly this purpose. Let your pride take a back seat for once." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. His shoulders sagged. "Fine, but I'm paying it back. Every cent." "If you insist." "I do." "Then we have a deal." She walked away before he could change his mind. The elevator doors closed. Eleanor leaned against the wall and allowed herself one moment of weakness. Her hands were trembling. Her heart was racing. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice that sounded suspiciously like her grandfather's was asking what the hell she thought she was doing. She didn't have an answer. She only knew that for the first time in 30 years, she felt awake, alive, like the music Marcus had played in that empty hall, raw and painful and impossibly beautiful. Whatever came next, she wouldn't run from it. Not anymore. The foundation board met the following morning in Eleanor's private conference room. 3 people sat around the table: Eleanor Margaret Wilson and Harold Chen, the foundation's longtime treasurer. They had the authority to approve emergency grants without full board review, a provision Theodore Ashford had insisted on for cases that couldn't wait. Lily Thompson. Harold read from the file Eleanor had prepared. 14 years old. Pulmonary condition requiring specialized surgery. Currently hospitalized at County General. Sophie. Eleanor corrected quietly. Her name is Sophie Chen. Harold looked up. Chen. Any relation to the security guard? His daughter. The room fell silent. Margaret Wilson leaned forward. Eleanor, this is highly irregular. I'm aware of that. You have a personal relationship with this family. That constitutes a conflict of interest, which is why I'm recusing myself from the vote. Eleanor pushed her chair back from the table. I've presented the case. The decision is yours. Margaret and Harold exchanged glances. They had known each other for 40 years, served on dozens of boards together, navigated countless difficult decisions. This one was different. The medical documentation is solid, Harold admitted. The girl clearly qualifies under our mission. And her father was one of Theodore's students, Margaret added. Briefly, but still. That creates a connection to the Foundation's legacy. Connections can be manufactured to justify almost anything. Are you suggesting Eleanor manufactured this? I'm suggesting we need to be careful. Vincent Drake is already looking for ammunition. If he finds out we approved a major grant to the daughter of someone Eleanor has been spending time with, let him find out. Margaret's voice was sharp. Theodore Ashford created this foundation to help artists in crisis. This child is an artist. She is in crisis. What more do we need? Harold sighed. The optics, Margaret. We need to consider the optics. The optics be damned. A 14-year-old girl is going to die without this surgery. Margaret turned to Eleanor. How much are we talking about? $380,000. Surgery recovery aftercare. Harold winced. That's nearly our entire discretionary budget for the year. Then we find more money. We fundraise. We do what we have to do. Margaret stood, her 82-year-old frame vibrating with intensity. I knew Theodore Ashford for 50 years. I know exactly what he would say if he were in this room right now. What's that? He would say that art isn't worth a damn if it doesn't serve the people who create it. He would say that foundations exist to help, not to accumulate capital. And he would say that anyone who lets a child die to protect optics deserves to burn in hell. The room fell silent again. Harold removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Fine. I vote yes. As do I, Margaret said. The motion passes. Eleanor, you can inform the family. Eleanor stood her throat tight. Thank you, both of you. Don't thank us, Harold replied. Just make sure this was the right call, for everyone's sake. Eleanor left the conference room with the approval letter in her hand. Her heart was pounding. She'd done it. Sophie would get her surgery. Marcus wouldn't have to choose between his pride and his daughter's life. But as she walked to her office, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Vincent Drake. Heard about your little foundation meeting this morning. Emergency grant to the janitor's daughter. How touching, how transparent. See you Friday. Eleanor stared at the screen. Vincent had someone on the inside. Someone who reported to him in real time. She thought about Harold's hesitation. The way he'd pushed back on the grant. Could it be him, or was it someone else entirely? It didn't matter. The vote was done. Sophie would get her surgery. Whatever Vincent was planning, Eleanor would face it head-on. She had 2 days to prepare for the fight of her life, and she wasn't going to waste a single minute. That evening, Eleanor returned to the hospital. She found Marcus in the cafeteria staring at a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. He looked up when she approached and she saw hope warring with suspicion in his eyes. The foundation approved the grant, she said without preamble. Sophie's surgery is covered. Marcus's face didn't change. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then something broke inside him. He covered his face with his hand, his only hand, and his shoulders began to shake. Eleanor stood frozen, unsure what to do. She had never seen a grown man cry. Not like this. Not with the raw, ugly grief of someone who had been carrying too much for too long. She sat down across from him and waited. It took several minutes for Marcus to compose himself. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, but clear. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You saved my daughter's life. The foundation saved her. I just made the case. Marcus shook his head. Don't do that. Don't minimize what you did. He reached across the table and took her hand. I've spent 10 years fighting alone, refusing help, convincing myself that needing others was weakness. And now I think maybe I was wrong. He squeezed her fingers gently. Thank you, Eleanor. From the bottom of whatever's left of my heart. Eleanor felt tears prickling at her own eyes. She blinked them back. There's something else, she said. The board meeting on Friday. Vincent Drake knows about the grant. He's going to use it against me. How? Conflict of interest. Inappropriate relationship with an employee. He'll spin it however serves his purposes. What can I do? Nothing. This is my fight. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled his hand back and straightened in his chair. No, he said. It's not just your fight. Not anymore. What do you mean? That video, the one that's all over the internet, it exists because Vincent Drake wanted to hurt you. He used me to do it. Marcus's jaw tightened. I don't like being used. Marcus, you don't have to. What if I played? Eleanor blinked. What? At the board meeting. What if I played for them, showed them what that hall is really about? That's a significant gesture. It's more than a gesture. Marcus leaned forward, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw fire in his eyes. You said your grandfather built that hall for moments of raw, honest music. You said that's what I reminded you of. I did. Then let me remind them too. Let me show those board members what they'd be destroying if they vote to sell. Eleanor's mind raced. It was risky. It was unprecedented. It was exactly the kind of bold move that could either save everything or blow up in their faces. Are you sure? She asked. Playing publicly after everything? I'm sure. Marcus stood. Sophie asked me once why I stopped performing. I told her it was because of my arm. But that was a lie. What was the real reason? Fear. Plain and simple fear. He looked down at his empty sleeve. I was afraid that if I played for people again, they'd see what I'd become. A broken man playing broken music. That's not what I saw. I know. That's why I'm willing to try. He met her eyes. You believed in me when you had no reason to. Let me return the favor. Eleanor rose from her chair. They stood facing each other across the cafeteria table, two people who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives. Friday, she said. The meeting starts at 2. Can you be there? I'll be there. And Sophie, she'll be cheering from her hospital bed. A real smile crossed his face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. She's been waiting her whole life to see me perform. Then let's give her something worth watching. Eleanor extended her hand. Marcus took it. They shook once firmly, sealing a partnership neither of them had expected. 2 days until the vote that would decide everything. 2 days until Marcus Chen played for an audience again. 2 days until Eleanor Ashford discovered just how far Vincent Drake was willing to go. Thursday morning arrived with a phone call that changed everything. Eleanor was reviewing her notes for the board meeting when her assistant burst through the door without knocking. Ms. Ashford, you need to see this, now. Jennifer thrust a tablet into her hands. On the screen was a news article from the city's largest newspaper. CEO of Ashford Symphony Hall funnels foundation, money to secret lover. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. The article was devastating. Anonymous sources described a romantic relationship between Eleanor and Marcus. It detailed the foundation grant, the late-night visits to the security station, the hospital trips. Every moment they'd shared had been twisted into something sordid. Who wrote this? It doesn't matter. It's everywhere. Every news outlet in the city picked it up. Jennifer's face was pale. The board members are calling. Vincent Drake has requested an emergency session this afternoon instead of Friday. Eleanor set down the tablet carefully. Her hands wanted to shake, but she wouldn't let them. Call Marcus Chen. Tell him to come to my office immediately. Ms. Ashford is that wise, given the allegations? Call him now. Jennifer hurried out. Eleanor turned to the window and stared at the city below. Vincent had played his hand. He'd taken every genuine moment between her and Marcus and weaponized it. The foundation grant that was supposed to save Sophie's life was now evidence of corruption. The friendship that had reminded Eleanor of her humanity was now a scandal. Her phone rang. Margaret Wilson. Eleanor? I just saw the article. It's lies, Margaret. All of it. I know that. But the board doesn't. Richard called me this morning. He's switching his vote. Eleanor closed her eyes. How many do we have left? You, me, and possibly Harold. That's 3 against 9. Margaret's voice was heavy. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I don't see how we win this. We're not done yet. What are you planning? Eleanor thought about Marcus, about Sophie, about the music that had reminded her why any of this mattered. Something my grandfather would have done. She hung up before Margaret could ask what she meant. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later. He walked into her office with the newspaper clutched in his fist, his face a mask of controlled fury. I didn't talk to anyone, he said immediately. I swear to you, Eleanor, I never... I know. This wasn't you. Then who? Vincent Drake. He's been building this case for weeks. Eleanor gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit down. We need to talk. Marcus sat, but his body remained tense. The article mentions Sophie. It mentions her surgery. I saw. They're calling her a prop, saying I used my sick daughter to manipulate you into giving me money. His voice cracked. She's 14 years old. She's lying in a hospital bed fighting for her life, and they're using her as a punchline. I'm going to fix this. How the story is out there. Everyone's seen it. Then we give them a different story. Marcus looked at her sharply. What do you mean? The board meeting has been moved to this afternoon. Vincent thinks he's caught me off guard. He thinks I'll come in defensive apologetic trying to explain away the allegations. "Won't you?" "No." Eleanor leaned forward. "I'm going to do what I should have done from the beginning. I'm going to tell the truth." "The truth about what?" "About you. About why you're playing at my symphony hall in the middle of the night. About what my grandfather saw in you 20 years ago." She paused. "About what I see in you now." Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You could lose everything." "I could. But I'd rather lose everything fighting for something real than keep everything by playing it safe." She met his eyes. "Are you still willing to play?" "Eleanor, I need to know Marcus, because what I'm about to do requires you to walk into that boardroom and show them exactly what Ashford Symphony Hall is supposed to be about." He didn't answer immediately. She watched him wrestling with the decision, the fear and the pride and the decade of hiding, battling against something newer, something fragile. "Sophie called me this morning," he said finally. "She saw the article. She was crying." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She wasn't crying because she was hurt. She was crying because she was angry. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She said, "Dad, you have to fight. You can't let them win." Smart girl. She gets it from her mother. Marcus stood. "What time is the meeting?" 2:00. "I'll be there." "Marcus?" Eleanor rose and came around the desk to stand in front of him. "Whatever happens today, I want you to know this wasn't a mistake. Meeting you, getting involved, none of it. Even if it costs you the hall. Even then." She touched his arm briefly. "Some things matter more than buildings." He looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, and for a moment, something passed between them that neither could name. "I'll see you at 2:00, he said. Then he was gone, and Eleanor was alone with the ruins of her reputation and the desperate hope that truth could still win against lies. The boardroom filled slowly. Eleanor arrived early, taking her place at the head of the table. She arranged her papers with deliberate calm, refusing to show any sign of the storm raging inside her. Vincent Drake entered at 1:45, flanked by 2 board members she'd counted as neutral. They weren't neutral anymore. She could see it in their eyes, the way they avoided looking at her, the way they clustered around Vincent, like disciples around a prophet. Margaret Wilson came in next, her face set in grim determination. She sat to Eleanor's right without a word. Harold Chen took his usual seat, his expression unreadable. Eleanor couldn't tell whose side he was on anymore. The others filed in, one by one. Richard Reynolds, her uncle, avoided her gaze entirely. That told her everything she needed to know about where his vote would fall. At exactly 2:00, Vincent called the meeting to order. "I believe we all know why we're here," he began. "The allegations published this morning raise serious questions about Ms. Ashford's fitness to lead this organization." "Allegations are not facts," Margaret interrupted. "I've seen nothing but anonymous sources and innuendo." "The foundation grant is a matter of record," Vincent countered. $380,000 to the daughter of an employee with whom Ms. Ashford has been conducting a personal relationship. That's not innuendo, that's documented. The grant was approved by the foundation board, of which Ms. Ashford recused herself. Margaret's voice was sharp. Proper protocols were followed. Protocols can be manipulated by those with sufficient motivation. Eleanor had heard enough. "May I speak?" she asked, her voice cutting through the argument. Vincent smiled magnanimously. "Of course. We're all eager to hear your explanation." Eleanor stood. She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. "I'm not going to explain myself," she said. "I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to pretend that what happened between me and Marcus Chen is something shameful." Murmurs rippled around the table. Vincent's smile faltered. "I discovered 3 nights ago that the man who has been working as our night security guard for 3 years is one of the most gifted violinists I've ever heard. He studied under my grandfather. He won the Ashford competition in 2005. He was supposed to be one of the great musicians of his generation." "This is all very touching." Vincent interrupted. But it doesn't address— I'm not finished. Eleanor's voice was steel. Marcus Chen gave up his career to raise his daughter after his wife died. He lost his arm in a factory accident while working double shifts to pay her medical bills. He spent the last 10 years sacrificing everything so that his child could survive. She turned to face Vincent directly. His daughter Sophie has a pulmonary condition that will kill her without specialized surgery. The Theodore Ashford Foundation was established by my grandfather to help artists in exactly this situation. Sophie is a cellist. She's 14 years old. She's been playing since she was 6. The question is not whether the girl deserves help, Vincent said smoothly. The question is whether you used foundation resources to benefit someone you have a personal relationship with. I recused myself from the vote. A technicality. Everyone knows you control that foundation. Then you know nothing about how foundations work. Eleanor slammed her palm on the table. Margaret Wilson and Harold Chen approved that grant. They did so because it was the right thing to do, not because I asked them to. Ms. Ashford, your emotional outbursts only confirm. My emotional outbursts confirm that I give a damn about something other than quarterly reports and real estate values. Eleanor was shouting now, but she didn't care. This hall was built by my grandfather to serve music and musicians, not to make money, not to impress donors, to create something beautiful and true and human. Times change, Vincent replied. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills. You've said that before. It wasn't true then either. Eleanor took a breath, forcing herself to calm down. Before you vote, I want you to see something, to hear something. This is a business meeting, not a concert. Indulge me, 5 minutes, then you can vote however you want. Vincent looked around the table, calculating. He was confident in his numbers. 5 minutes wouldn't change anything. Fine, he said. 5 minutes. Eleanor walked to the boardroom door and opened it. Marcus Chen stood in the hallway, her grandfather's Stradivarius case in his hand. The room went utterly silent. Marcus walked in slowly, his empty sleeve visible to everyone. He set the case on the conference table and opened it, revealing the legendary instrument. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor said, this is Marcus Chen. Some of you may remember him from the 2005 competition. Most of you have seen the video that's been circulating online, the video that someone from this organization posted without permission. She looked at Vincent. His face had gone pale. Marcus has agreed to play for you today, not to prove anything, not to save my job or his daughter's life, but because this is what Ashford Symphony Hall is supposed to be about. Marcus lifted the violin from its case. His movements were careful, reverent. He tucked the instrument under his chin and raised the bow. I haven't performed publicly in 15 years, he said quietly. I thought I never would again, but sometimes you have to face your fears. He began to play. The piece was Bach. Partita number 2 in D minor. The same piece he had played 20 years ago when Theodore Ashford first recognized his talent. The music filled the boardroom like water filling a vessel. It started soft, almost tentative, then grew in power and complexity. Marcus's single arm worked the bow with impossible grace, drawing sounds from the instrument that seemed to defy physics. But it wasn't the technique that made the board members stop breathing. It was the emotion. Every note carried the weight of everything Marcus had lost. His wife, his career, his arm, his pride. It was all there in the music, transformed into something heartbreakingly beautiful. Eleanor watched the faces around the table change. The hostility faded. The calculation disappeared. For a few minutes, they weren't board members or executives or enemies. They were just human beings, reminded of something they had forgotten. When the music ended, the silence was absolute. Marcus lowered the violin. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. I clean your building 6 nights a week, he said. I empty your trash cans and scrub your toilets. And when everyone's gone, I play. Because this hall, this beautiful, impossible hall, is the only place left where I feel like myself. He looked around the table. If you sell this building to developers, you won't just be destroying bricks and mortar. You'll be destroying what it represents. A place where a one-armed janitor can play Bach at midnight and remember who he used to be. He packed the violin away carefully. That's all I have to say. He walked out without waiting for a response. The boardroom remained silent for a long moment. Then Vincent Drake cleared his throat. Very moving. But this doesn't change the financial realities. I call for a vote on the motion to begin negotiations with Whitmore Development. Seconded, said one of his allies. Eleanor sat down slowly. She had done everything she could. The rest was up to fate. All in favor of the motion? Vincent asked. 4 hands went up. Vincent's allies. Eleanor counted them. 4. He had said he had 8. All opposed. 3 hands. Eleanor Margaret Harold. Abstentions. 5 hands rose. Richard Reynolds. And 4 others who had remained silent throughout the meeting. Eleanor did the math quickly. 4 in favor. 3 opposed. 5 abstentions. The motion needed a majority to pass. It had failed. Vincent's face contorted with rage. The abstentions are cowardice. I demand those members declare their positions. The rules allow for abstention. Margaret said calmly. The motion does not carry. Meeting adjourned. This isn't over, Eleanor. Vincent was on his feet, pointing at her across the table. I'll take this to the shareholders. I'll take it to the press. You'll do nothing. A new voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. An elderly man stood there leaning on a cane. He was frail, clearly ill, but his eyes were sharp, and his presence commanded instant attention. Who the hell are you? Vincent demanded. Thomas Ashford. The old man limped into the room. Theodore's younger brother, Eleanor's great-uncle, and as of this morning, the majority shareholder of Reynolds Records. Eleanor's jaw dropped. She hadn't seen Thomas in years. He'd been living in Europe battling cancer, supposedly too sick to travel. That's impossible, Vincent sputtered. I would have been informed. You were not informed because it was none of your business. Thomas settled into an empty chair with a grimace of pain. I've spent the last 3 months quietly acquiring shares from elderly widows and disinterested heirs. As of today, I control 52% of this company. The room had gone completely still. Theodore and I had our differences. Thomas continued. We didn't speak for the last 20 years of his life, but that doesn't mean I'll sit by and watch his legacy destroyed by corporate vultures. He turned to Eleanor. I saw the news this morning. Saw what they were trying to do to you. Got on a plane immediately. He smiled, and for a moment Eleanor saw Theodore in his face. You did good, Eleanor. Theodore would be proud. Uncle Thomas, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just keep fighting. He turned his sharp gaze on Vincent. As for you, Mr. Drake, your services are no longer required. Security will escort you out. Vincent's face had gone from pale to purple. You can't do this. I have contracts. I have rights. You have 30 seconds to leave this room before I have you arrested for corporate espionage. Thomas's voice was pleasant, but his eyes were ice. I know about your meetings with Whitmore Development. I know about the kickbacks they promised you. I know everything. Vincent looked around the table for support. He found none. He straightened his jacket, his movements jerky with barely contained rage. This isn't over, he said to Eleanor. Not by a long shot. Yes, she replied quietly. It is. Vincent stormed out. The door slammed behind him. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Then slowly they began to rise and drift toward the door, murmuring to each other, processing what had just happened. Margaret Wilson stopped beside Eleanor's chair. That was quite a meeting, she said dryly. That's one word for it. Your uncle is something else. He always was. Eleanor looked at Thomas, who was leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed, clearly exhausted from the effort of appearing. I need to talk to him. Go. I'll handle the cleanup here. Eleanor walked to her great-uncle's side. He opened his eyes when she approached. "Hello, Eleanor. You came. Took me 40 hours of travel and more medication than I care to admit." He smiled weakly. "But I made it. Why, you and grandfather never—" "I know. We were both stubborn old fools." Thomas reached for her hand. "I watched that video this morning, the one of Marcus Chen playing. And I thought about Theodore, about what he would have wanted for this place." "What would he have wanted?" "Exactly what you're doing. Finding talent, nurturing it, fighting for it against all the people who just see dollar signs." He squeezed her hand. "I should have come back years ago. I'm sorry I didn't." Eleanor felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. "You're here now. For however long I have left." Thomas's expression grew serious. "The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. I wanted to spend that time in Paris surrounded by beautiful women and good wine. Instead, I'm going to spend it making sure my brother's hall survives." "Uncle Thomas." "Don't argue. My mind is made up." He released her hand and struggled to his feet. "Now where's this Marcus Chen? I want to meet the man who can play Bach like that with one arm." "He left. He's probably outside wondering what happened." "Then let's go find him." They found Marcus in the lobby sitting on a bench beside her grandfather's Stradivarius case. He looked up when Eleanor and Thomas approached. "Is it over?" he asked. "It's over. We won." Marcus let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. "Really? Really?" Eleanor sat beside him. "Marcus, this is my great-uncle Thomas. He just saved the Symphony Hall." Marcus stood to shake Thomas's hand. The old man studied him with shrewd eyes. "Theodore talked about you," Thomas said. "Years ago, before you disappeared. He said you were the most talented student he ever had." "He never told me that." "He wouldn't. Theodore didn't believe in compliments. He thought they made people soft." Thomas smiled. "He was wrong about a lot of things." "Yes," Marcus agreed quietly. "He was. Will you come back? Perform again?" Marcus glanced at Eleanor. Something passed between them. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I have a daughter in the hospital, a surgery to get through, a lot of things to figure out." "Of course. Take your time." Thomas turned to Eleanor. "I'm going to check into a hotel and sleep for about 3 days. Call me when you need me." He hobbled toward the exit, leaving Eleanor and Marcus alone in the lobby. They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the echoes of everything that had happened. "You did it," Marcus said finally. "You actually did it." "We did it. I couldn't have done any of this without you." "I just played some Bach." "You played some Bach so beautifully that 5 board members couldn't bring themselves to vote against us." Eleanor shook her head. "That's not nothing." Marcus looked at the violin case in his lap. The Stradivarius, the instrument that had belonged to Theodore Ashford, that had heard some of the greatest music of the 20th century. "Your grandfather gave this to me," he said. 20 years ago, when I won the competition. He said I had earned it." Marcus ran his hand over the case. "I had to sell it after Margaret died, to pay for Sophie's treatments. I didn't know it ended up back here." Eleanor felt something shift inside her. "My father bought it at auction. He didn't know who had owned it. I recognized it the first night I worked here. It was like seeing a ghost." "Marcus." Eleanor touched his arm. "Take it." "What?" "Take the violin. It's yours. It was always yours." "Eleanor, I can't." "You can. My grandfather wanted you to have it. You earned it." She stood. "Consider it a loan if that makes you feel better. But take it home. Play it for Sophie." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he stood and picked up the case. "I don't know how to thank you." "Then don't. Just promise me something. Anything. Don't hide anymore. Whatever comes next, the surgery, the recovery, everything, don't hide." Marcus looked at the violin case, at Eleanor, at the lobby of the Symphony Hall where he had spent 3 years cleaning and dreaming and playing in secret. "I promise," he said. He walked toward the exit, the Stradivarius in his hand. At the door, he paused and looked back. "Eleanor." "Yes." "Thank you for seeing me." Then he was gone, and Eleanor was alone in the lobby of her grandfather's hall, surrounded by ghosts and possibilities, and the faint echo of music that still hung in the air. Sophie was awake when Marcus walked into her hospital room. She saw the violin case first. Her eyes went wide tracking it as he set it down on the chair beside her bed. "Dad, is that the Stradivarius?" "Yes." "But how?" "Eleanor gave it to me. Said it was always mine." Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, carefully avoiding the tubes and wires. "How are you feeling?" "Forget how I'm feeling. What happened at the meeting?" Sophie tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. "Did you play? Did it work? Is she fired? Is the hall saved?" Marcus laughed. It felt strange coming out of his throat, rusty from disuse. "One question at a time." "Dad?" "Yes, I played. Yes, it worked. No, she's not fired. Yes, the hall is saved." He reached for her hand. "It's over, sweetheart. We won." Sophie's face crumpled. She pulled her hand free and covered her eyes, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Hey, what's wrong?" Marcus leaned forward, alarmed. "Sophie, talk to me." "I was so scared," she whispered through her fingers. "I saw the news this morning. They were saying such terrible things about you and Eleanor. I thought it was my fault. Because of the surgery money. None of this is your fault. But if I wasn't sick—" "Stop!" Marcus gently pulled her hands away from her face. "Look at me. None of this is your fault. Do you understand? The only people responsible for this mess are the ones who tried to use us as weapons. Vincent Drake. Vincent Drake is gone, escorted out of the building by security." Marcus smiled grimly. "He won't be bothering anyone again." Sophie wiped her eyes. "Really? Really? Eleanor's great-uncle showed up. Apparently he's been buying shares for months. He controls the company now." "That sounds like something out of a movie." "Our whole life sounds like something out of a movie." Marcus picked up the violin case and set it on his lap. "Do you want to see it?" Sophie nodded eagerly. He opened the case. The Stradivarius gleamed in the fluorescent hospital light, its centuries-old wood warm and alive. "It's beautiful," Sophie breathed. "Your grandmother, your mom's mom, saw me play this violin the night I met your mother. She said the instrument chose me." Marcus ran his finger along the strings. "I thought she was being romantic, but maybe she was right. Will you play it for me?" Marcus looked at his daughter, 14 years old, fighting for every breath, dreaming of concerts she might never perform. "What do you want to hear?" "Something Mom would have liked." He lifted the violin from its case. The weight was familiar, the feel of it under his chin, like coming home after a long journey. He began to play. It was a piece he had written for Margaret years ago before Sophie was born. A simple melody that built into something complex and beautiful, full of the joy they had shared and the sorrow of losing her. Sophie closed her eyes and listened. When the music ended, she was smiling. "She would have loved that," she said softly. "She did love it. I played it at our wedding." Marcus set the violin down carefully. "I haven't played it since she died." "Why not?" "Because it hurt too much. Because every note reminded me of what I'd lost." He looked at his daughter. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe remembering is part of healing." Sophie reached for his hand again. "I'm glad you played today, at the board meeting. I'm glad people got to hear you." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The surgery was scheduled for Monday. Eleanor spent the weekend at the hospital, alternating between Sophie's room and the waiting area. She told herself she was there to provide moral support, but the truth was simpler: she didn't want to be anywhere else. Marcus noticed. He didn't say anything, but she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was something in his eyes, gratitude maybe, or something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. On Sunday night, Sophie was asleep, and Marcus was pacing the hallway when Eleanor found him. "You should rest," she said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "I can't rest. Every time I close my eyes, I see all the ways this could go wrong." "The doctors say her chances are excellent." "Doctors say a lot of things." Marcus stopped pacing and leaned against the wall. "When Margaret was sick, the doctors said she had 2 years. She had 14 months. When Sophie was diagnosed, they said she'd need surgery by age 10. She made it to 14. Numbers don't mean anything when it's your child." Eleanor stood beside him. "What would help?" "I don't know. Distraction, maybe." He laughed humorlessly. "Tell me something about yourself. Something I don't know." Eleanor thought for a moment. "When I was 12, the night my grandfather told me I wasn't good enough, I went home and destroyed my piano." Marcus looked at her sharply. "What?" "I took a hammer to it, smashed every key, ripped out the strings." She smiled at the memory. "My mother found me sitting in the wreckage crying my eyes out." "What did she do?" "She sat down next to me and didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, 'Feel better.' Did you?" "No, I felt worse. I'd destroyed something beautiful because someone told me I wasn't worthy of it." Eleanor's voice grew quiet. "I've been doing that ever since, destroying things before they can be taken from me." "That's why you never played again." "That's why I never did a lot of things, never got married, never had children, never let anyone get close enough to hurt me." She turned to face him. "Until you." Marcus didn't respond immediately. His eyes searched her face. "Eleanor, I'm not saying this because I expect anything. I'm saying it because you asked for a distraction, and this is the most honest thing I can offer." She took a breath. "You reminded me what it feels like to care about something. About someone. I'd forgotten. I'm a janitor with one arm and a sick daughter. I'm not exactly a prize. You're a genius musician who sacrificed everything for his child. You're the bravest person I've ever met." Eleanor held his gaze. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever happens after, I want you to know that." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. "Thank you," he said simply. They stood like that for a while, hand in hand, in the hospital corridor, two people who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives. Monday morning came too fast. Eleanor sat with Marcus in the surgical waiting room while Sophie was being prepped. The minutes crawled by. Marcus couldn't stop checking his watch. "She asked about you this morning," he said. "What did she say?" "She asked if you were going to be here. I said yes." He glanced at her. "Was that presumptuous?" "No. I wouldn't be anywhere else." The surgical nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Chen, Sophie wants to see you before we take her in." Marcus stood. He looked back at Eleanor. "Come with me." "Are you sure this is family time?" "Your family now, whether you like it or not." They walked to the pre-op area together. Sophie was lying on a gurney dressed in a hospital gown, an IV already in her arm. She looked small and fragile and impossibly young. But when she saw Eleanor, she smiled. "You came." "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." "That's cheesy." "I know. I'm not good at this." Eleanor took Sophie's hand. "How are you feeling?" "Scared. Excited. Scared." Sophie's grip tightened. "Will you do something for me?" "Anything. Take care of my dad while I'm in surgery. He's going to pretend he's fine, but he's not. He's never fine when it comes to me." Eleanor glanced at Marcus, who was pretending not to hear. "I promise. And one more thing." Sophie looked at her father, then back at Eleanor. "When I get out of here, I want to play at the Symphony Hall, a real concert with real people. Can you make that happen?" "Sophie," Marcus started. "I've been dreaming about it my whole life. Playing where Grandpa Theodore played, where you played." Sophie's eyes were bright with determination. "I'm not going to die, Dad. I'm going to get through this surgery, and I'm going to practice until I'm ready, and then I'm going to play that hall." Eleanor felt her throat tighten. "You'll have your concert," she said. "I promise." The surgical team arrived to take Sophie to the operating room. Marcus bent down to kiss his daughter's forehead. "I love you, sweetheart." "I love you too, Dad. See you on the other side." They wheeled her away. Marcus stood frozen watching until she disappeared through the double doors. Then his knees buckled. Eleanor caught him before he hit the floor. She guided him to a chair and sat beside him, her arm around his shoulders. "She's going to be fine," she said. "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it." "How? How can you believe it?" "Because she's your daughter, and you've never given up on anything in your life." Eleanor pulled him closer. "She inherited your stubbornness. That's worth more than any surgeon's skill." Marcus laughed weakly. "I hope you're right." "I'm always right. Ask anyone." He leaned into her, letting her take some of his weight. It was the first time since Margaret died that he had let anyone support him. They sat together as the hours passed. The surgery was supposed to take 8 hours. It took 12. By hour 10, Marcus had worn a path in the waiting room carpet. Eleanor had stopped trying to calm him down and simply walked beside him, step for step, a silent partner in his anxiety. At hour 11, a nurse came out to update them. "The surgery is taking longer than expected due to some complications with the valve placement," she said. "Doctor, Patterson wants you to know that Sophie is stable and fighting hard." "Complications?" Marcus's voice was sharp. "What kind of complications?" "I don't have details, sir. The surgeon will speak with you as soon as the procedure is complete." She left. Marcus turned to Eleanor, his face ashen. "Complications. That's what they said about Margaret. Complications. This isn't the same situation." "How do you know?" "How can you possibly know?" "I don't." Eleanor grabbed his shoulders and forced him to look at her. "I don't know anything for certain, but I know that falling apart right now won't help Sophie. I know that she's in there fighting and we need to fight with her." How do we fight from out here?" Eleanor thought about it, really thought about it. "We play." "What?" "The Stradivarius is in the car. Go get it. Play for her. Play for yourself. Play because that's what you do when the world is falling apart." Marcus stared at her. "In a hospital waiting room. Why not? Music doesn't care about location. Your grandfather taught you that." "My grandfather taught me a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. This wasn't one of them." Eleanor pushed him toward the door. "Go, get the violin. I'll clear it with the staff." Marcus hesitated for one more moment. Then he nodded and walked out. Eleanor approached the nurse's station. "Excuse me, I have an unusual request." 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the corner of the waiting room with the Stradivarius in his hand. The nurses had gathered other patients' families, anyone who wanted to listen. Someone had propped open the door so the music would carry down the hallway. Eleanor sat in the front row of plastic chairs. "What should I play?" Marcus asked. "Whatever Sophie would want to hear." He thought about it. Then he lifted the violin and began. It was the piece he had played for Sophie the day before, the one he had written for Margaret. But this time it was different. He was adding new passages, new harmonies, letting the music evolve as he played. The waiting room fell silent. Nurses paused in the hallway. A doctor on his way to surgery stopped to listen. Marcus played for his daughter. He played for his wife. He played for every moment of joy and sorrow he had ever experienced, pouring it all through the strings of that ancient instrument. And somewhere in the operating room, surrounded by surgeons and machines and the cold efficiency of modern medicine, Sophie Chen's heart began to beat stronger. The surgery ended at hour 12. Dr. Patterson emerged from the operating room, looking exhausted but triumphant. "Mr. Chen, the procedure was successful." Marcus dropped the violin. Eleanor caught it before it hit the floor. She set it aside and turned in time to see Marcus collapse into the doctor's arms. "She's okay," he was saying. "She's really okay. She's in recovery now. The valve replacement went well. There were some complications with scar tissue from previous procedures, but we managed to address them." Dr. Patterson smiled. "Your daughter is a fighter, Mr. Chen. When can I see her?" "Give us an hour to get her settled. Then you can sit with her." Marcus turned to Eleanor. His face was wet with tears, but he was smiling, really smiling for the first time since she'd met him. She made it. She made it. He hugged her. It was sudden and fierce and completely unexpected. His arm wrapped around her and pulled her close, and Eleanor found herself hugging him back, holding on to this broken, brilliant man who had somehow become the most important person in her world. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair, "for everything. You would have done the same for me." "Would I?" "Yes, that's who you are." They held each other for a long moment. Then Marcus pulled back, wiping his eyes. "I need to call Mrs. Patterson, Sophie's music teacher. She's been texting me every hour." "Go, make your calls. I'll be here." He nodded and walked toward the window for better reception. Eleanor sat down slowly. Her legs were shaking. The relief was overwhelming, washing over her in waves. Her phone buzzed. A text from Margaret Wilson. "Heard about Sophie. How is she?" Eleanor typed back. "Surgery successful. She's going to be okay." The response came immediately. "Thank God. Thomas wants to see you when you have time. Says it's important." Eleanor looked at Marcus, still on the phone, gesturing animatedly as he shared the good news. She could wait. Whatever Thomas wanted could wait. Some moments were too precious to interrupt. 3 days later, Sophie was awake and complaining about hospital food. Eleanor brought her a contraband cheeseburger and fries from the diner across the street. Sophie devoured it like she hadn't eaten in weeks. "You're going to get me in trouble," Marcus said, watching his daughter inhale French fries. "Live a little, Dad." Sophie grinned at Eleanor. "You're my favorite person right now." "That's just the grease talking." "Maybe, but you're still my favorite." Eleanor smiled. She'd been spending more time at the hospital than at her office. Jennifer had taken over the day-to-day operations, calling with questions and updates that Eleanor answered from Sophie's bedside. The hall was running fine without her. That should have bothered her. Instead, it felt like freedom. "I heard you playing during my surgery," Sophie said suddenly. Marcus and Eleanor both looked at her. "That's impossible," Marcus said. "You were under anesthesia." "I know, but I heard it anyway. The piece about Mom." Sophie's eyes were distant. "It was like she was there with me, holding my hand, telling me everything was going to be okay." Marcus's face crumpled. He turned away, hiding his tears. Eleanor reached across the bed and took Sophie's hand. "Maybe she was," she said quietly. "Maybe music reaches places we can't understand. Do you believe that?" "I'm starting to." Sophie nodded, satisfied. Then she looked at her father's back. "Dad." He turned, composing himself with obvious effort. "Yes, sweetheart. I want to hear you play again. Not here, but at the hall. On a real stage with a real audience." She glanced at Eleanor. "Both of you." "Both of us." "Eleanor plays piano, she told me. Said she hasn't played in 30 years, but she used to be good." Eleanor felt her face flush. "I mentioned it once. I didn't think you were paying attention." "I always pay attention." Sophie's grin was impish. "Think about it. A concert. You on violin, Dad, Eleanor on piano, me on cello. A family thing." "We're not family," Marcus said gently. "Not yet." Sophie's eyes sparkled. "But I have a feeling." Eleanor didn't know what to say. She looked at Marcus, who looked back at her with an expression that was equal parts embarrassment and hope. "We'll see," Eleanor said finally. "Let's focus on your recovery first." Fine, but I'm holding you to it. Eleanor's phone buzzed again. Thomas. I need to take this, she said. I'll be back later. She stepped into the hallway and answered. Eleanor, how's the girl? Recovering. She's strong. Good. I need to see you. Today if possible. There's something we need to discuss. Can it wait? I don't want to leave. It concerns Marcus Chen and his future with this organization. Eleanor's heart skipped. What about him? Come to my hotel. The Windsor room 8 or 12. I'll explain everything. He hung up before she could argue. Eleanor stood in the hallway, her mind racing. What could Thomas possibly want to discuss about Marcus? The video incident was over. Vincent Drake was gone. The hall was saved. Unless there was something else. Something she didn't know about. She went back to Sophie's room. I have to go, she told Marcus. My great-uncle wants to see me. Everything okay? I'm not sure. He mentioned you. Marcus's expression flickered with concern. Should I be worried? I don't know, but I'll find out. She said goodbye to Sophie and headed for the elevator. Whatever Thomas wanted, she would face it head-on. She was done hiding from difficult conversations. The Windsor Hotel was old money and quiet elegance. Thomas's suite overlooked the city. He was sitting by the window when Eleanor arrived, looking smaller and more fragile than he had at the board meeting. Thank you for coming. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please sit. Eleanor sat. What's this about? Thomas reached for a folder on the side table. Before we get to that, I want to show you something. He handed her the folder. Inside were photographs, letters, and what looked like legal documents. What is this? Theodore's private papers. I've had them for years. He sent them to me before he died with instructions to give them to you when the time was right. Thomas's eyes were distant. I think the time is right. Eleanor began reading. The first letter was dated 20 years ago. Dear Thomas, it began. I have made terrible mistakes. The boy Marcus Chen, I drove him away. I saw his potential and I was afraid of it. Afraid of what it meant for my legacy for Eleanor. I destroyed something beautiful because I couldn't control it. Eleanor looked up. Grandfather wrote this. Keep reading. She turned to the next letter, and the next, and the next. They were all about Marcus, about his talent, about Theodore's regret for pushing him away, about how he had secretly followed Marcus's career, celebrated his successes, mourned his struggles. The last letter was dated 2 weeks before Theodore died. I know now that I was wrong. About Marcus, about Eleanor, about everything. I spent my life demanding perfection because I was terrified of failure. I pushed away everyone who loved me, including my own granddaughter. If there is any justice in this world, perhaps they will find each other after I'm gone. Perhaps they will heal the wounds I created. Eleanor's hands were shaking. He knew, she whispered. He knew I wasn't good enough to be a concert pianist, and he pushed me away on purpose. He knew you were talented. He was afraid that if you pursued music, you would outshine him. Thomas's voice was gentle. Theodore loved you, Eleanor, but he loved his legacy more. That's not love. That's control. Yes, it is. Thomas reached for her hand. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. What you're feeling for Marcus Chen, whatever it is not a betrayal of your grandfather's memory. It's exactly what Theodore wanted. In the end, he wanted you both to be happy. Eleanor stared at the letters. All those years of thinking she wasn't good enough. All those years of hiding from music because her grandfather had told her she wasn't worthy. And he had known. He had known, and he had lied, and he had regretted it too late. There's something else, Thomas said. In the papers. A legal document. Eleanor found it. A codicil to Theodore's will. I hereby bequeath to Marcus Chen, known professionally as Monsieur Chen, the sum of $500,000 to be held in trust until such time as he returns to professional performance. It is my hope that this gift will enable him to pursue the career I wrongfully prevented." Eleanor read it twice, 3 times. He left Marcus money. Money that has been sitting in a trust for 5 years. No one knew about it except me and Theodore's lawyer. Thomas smiled sadly. "I think it's time Marcus learned the truth." Eleanor closed the folder slowly. "Why are you telling me this? Why not tell Marcus directly?" "Because I'm dying, Eleanor. I have weeks, maybe days. I won't be here to explain, to answer questions, to help him understand." Thomas squeezed her hand. "But you will be. You can give him this. You can give him Theodore's apology. An apology from beyond the grave. Better than no apology at all." Eleanor sat with the folder in her lap, feeling the weight of decades of secrets. Her grandfather had loved Marcus, had recognized his talent, driven him away out of fear, and spent his final years consumed by regret. And now it was Eleanor's job to deliver that truth. "I'll tell him," she said finally. "But not today. Today, he's focused on Sophie. This can wait until she's stronger." "That's wise." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "You've grown into a remarkable woman, Eleanor. Theodore would be proud." "I'm not sure that matters anymore." "Perhaps not, but I'm proud. For whatever that's worth." Eleanor stood and bent to kiss her great-uncle's cheek. "It's worth a lot," she said. "Thank you, Uncle Thomas, for everything." She left the hotel with the folder tucked under her arm. The weight of her grandfather's secrets pressed against her chest. But somewhere beneath the pain, she felt something unexpected. 3 weeks after the surgery, Sophie took her first steps without assistance. Eleanor was there when it happened. She had become a fixture at the hospital, arriving each morning with coffee for Marcus and contraband snacks for Sophie. The nurses had stopped questioning her presence. They simply smiled and let her pass. Sophie stood at the edge of her bed, gripping the railing with white-knuckled determination. Marcus hovered nearby, ready to catch her if she fell. "I can do this," Sophie muttered. "I can do this." "Take your time, sweetheart." "I don't want to take my time. I want to walk." She let go of the railing, one step, then another. Her legs trembled. Her breath came in short gasps, but she kept moving. By the time she reached Eleanor's chair, she was grinning. "I did it!" Eleanor caught her before she could collapse. "You did it!" Marcus was wiping his eyes. "You're amazing, Sophie." "I know." Sophie settled into Eleanor's lap like she had done it 100 times before. "Does this mean I can go home soon?" "A few more days," Marcus said. "The doctors want to make sure your lungs are stable." "My lungs are fine. I'm fine. I want to go home and practice." "Practice can wait." "No, it can't." Sophie looked at Eleanor. Tell him I need to practice." Eleanor raised her hands in surrender. "I'm staying out of this one." "Coward." "Absolutely." Sophie laughed, and the sound filled the room with something that had been missing for too long. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Marcus watched his daughter with an expression that made Eleanor's heart ache. The fear was still there. It would probably always be there. But it had been joined by something else. Hope. Belief in a future he had been too afraid to imagine. Eleanor had been carrying her grandfather's folder for 3 weeks. Every day she told herself she would tell Marcus the truth. Every day she found a reason to wait. But time was running out. Thomas had called that morning. His voice was weaker, his breathing labored. "Soon," he had said. "It needs to be soon." She knew he was right. That evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep, Eleanor found Marcus in the hospital cafeteria. He was staring at a cup of cold coffee, lost in thought. "Can we talk?" she asked. He looked up immediately, alert. "Is something wrong?" "Is Sophie?" "Sophie's fine. This is about something else." Eleanor sat across from him. "Something I should have told you days ago." Marcus studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him straighten in his chair. "I'm listening." Eleanor pulled the folder from her bag and set it on the table between them. "These are my grandfather's private papers. Thomas gave them to me. They're about you." Marcus didn't touch the folder. "About me. Theodore kept track of you after you left. Your career, your marriage, everything." Eleanor swallowed hard. "He regretted what happened between you. He wrote about it obsessively in the years before he died. He regretted pushing me away. He regretted destroying you. That's the word he used. Destroying." Marcus was very still. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because there's more." Eleanor opened the folder and found the codicil. "Theodore left you money. $500,000 held in trust until you returned to professional performance." The silence stretched between them. Marcus's face was unreadable. "I don't understand," he said finally. "He spent 2 years telling me I wasn't good enough. He said I lacked discipline. He said I would never amount to anything. He lied. Why? Because he was afraid." Eleanor pushed the letters across the table. "Read them. All of them. He explains everything." Marcus picked up the first letter with trembling fingers. He read slowly, his expression shifting as the words sank in. Confusion gave way to anger. Anger gave way to grief. Grief gave way to something Eleanor couldn't name. When he finished the last letter, he set it down carefully. "He was jealous," Marcus said, "of me. He was jealous of your potential. He saw something in you that he knew he could never match, and it terrified him. So, he destroyed my confidence instead." "Yes," Marcus laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. "I spent 15 years believing I wasn't good enough. I gave up everything, my career, my dreams, because Theodore Ashford told me I didn't have what it takes." He looked at Eleanor with red-rimmed eyes. "And now you're telling me it was all a lie." "I'm telling you the truth. The truth Theodore was too proud to tell you himself. The truth doesn't fix anything. It doesn't give me back the years I lost. It doesn't give me back my arm." Marcus's voice cracked. "What am I supposed to do with this, Eleanor? Forgive him? Pretend it doesn't matter? I don't know." Eleanor reached for his hand. "I don't have any answers. I only know that you deserve to know." Marcus pulled away. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. "I need some air." He walked out of the cafeteria. Eleanor didn't follow. Some wounds needed to bleed before they could heal. She sat alone with her grandfather's letters, reading them again, seeing the man behind the legend for the first time. Theodore Ashford had been brilliant and cruel and terrified of his own inadequacy. He had built an empire on the broken dreams of people he was too proud to acknowledge as equals. And in the end, he had died alone, consumed by regret. Eleanor wondered if that would be her fate too. Alone in a beautiful building surrounded by ghosts. Her phone buzzed. "Thomas." "Eleanor, I need to see you. Tonight." His voice was weaker than she had ever heard it. "I'll be there in an hour. Bring Marcus, please. There's something I need to say to him, before it's too late." She found Marcus on the hospital roof. He was standing at the edge looking out over the city lights. For one terrifying moment, Eleanor thought, but no. His posture wasn't defeated. It was contemplative. "Thomas wants to see you," she said. Marcus didn't turn around. "Why? I don't know, but he's dying. He doesn't have much time left. So I should go comfort a dying man I've never met because he has something to say about a dead man who ruined my life. You should go because you'll regret it if you don't." Eleanor moved to stand beside him. "Trust me, I know something about regret." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The city hummed below them, oblivious to the small dramas playing out in its towers. "I don't know how to feel," he said finally, "about any of this. Theodore, the money, what it means. You don't have to know, not yet. Then what do I do? You come with me to see Thomas. You listen to what he has to say. And then you figure out the rest." Eleanor touched his arm. One step at a time. That's what you always tell Sophie, right? Marcus looked at her. In the dim light, his eyes were the color of rain. You're using my own words against me. Is it working? Probably. He exhaled slowly. All right. Let's go see a dying man about my ruined life. They drove to the Windsor Hotel in silence. Thomas's suite was darker than before. The curtains were drawn. A single lamp cast shadows across the walls. Thomas was in bed now, propped up on pillows, an oxygen tube running to his nose. He looked ancient fragile, like a paper doll that might crumble at any moment, but his eyes were still sharp. Marcus Chen, he said. I've wanted to meet you for 20 years. Marcus stood at the foot of the bed, uncertain. Mr. Ashford? Thomas, please. The old man gestured weakly. Sit, both of you. I don't have much time, and there's a lot to say. They sat in chairs that had been placed beside the bed. Someone had anticipated this moment. Eleanor told you about the letters, Thomas said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And the money? Yes. Good. Thomas coughed a wet rattling sound. Theodore was my brother. I loved him. But I also knew what he was capable of. The cruelty he dressed up as high standards, the fear he disguised as perfectionism. He ruined my career. He tried to, but he failed. Thomas's eyes found Marcus's face. You're still here, still playing, still creating music that makes people weep. Theodore couldn't destroy that, no matter how hard he tried. I lost 15 years. You gained a daughter. You gained strength. You gained a kind of wisdom that Theodore never had. Thomas reached for Marcus's hand. I watched that video, the one that caused all the trouble. I saw a man playing Paganini with one arm and more passion than my brother ever possessed. Theodore would have been jealous. He would have been proud. He would have been afraid. Afraid of what? Of being forgotten. Theodore knew that when you played, people remembered the music, not the musician who taught you. He couldn't stand that. Thomas squeezed Marcus's hand weakly. But you need to understand something. The fear wasn't about you. It was about him, his inadequacy, his legacy, his terror of being ordinary. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm dying, and dead men don't get second chances. But you do. Thomas's voice grew urgent. The money Theodore left you, take it, use it, start a music program, open a school, do something he never could, nurture talent without trying to control it. I don't want his money. Then give it away. Donate it to Sophie's hospital, build a statue, burn it in the street. Thomas coughed again. But don't let his ghost win. Don't spend the rest of your life angry at a dead man. Eleanor watched Marcus's face. The anger was still there, but something else was emerging. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance. What about Eleanor? Marcus asked suddenly. Thomas smiled. What about her? Theodore did the same thing to her. Told her she wasn't good enough. Drove her away from music. I know. Thomas looked at his great niece. And I think you two might be able to help each other heal, if you're brave enough. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. Uncle Thomas. I'm too old and too close to death for subtlety. Thomas's eyes sparkled with faint humor. You love each other. Anyone can see it. The question is whether you're going to be as foolish as my brother and let fear control you. Neither Eleanor nor Marcus spoke. Think about it, Thomas said. That's all I ask. He closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. For a moment, Eleanor thought he had slipped away. Then his eyes opened again. One more thing. The concert. What concert? Sophie's concert, the one she asked for. Thomas smiled. Make it happen. For her. For yourselves. For Theodore's hall. His voice was barely a whisper now. Make it something he would have been proud of, and jealous of, both. His eyes closed again. This time, they didn't reopen. Thomas Ashford died at 3:47 a.m., with Eleanor holding his hand and Marcus standing vigil by the window. The funeral was small. A handful of distant relatives, a few business associates. Margaret Wilson, who wept quietly in the front row. Eleanor delivered the eulogy. She talked about Thomas's courage traveling across the world while dying to save his brother's legacy. She talked about his wisdom, knowing when to speak and when to let others find their own answers. She talked about his love, complicated, imperfect, but real. She didn't mention Theodore. Some wounds were too fresh to address in public. After the service, Marcus found her in the cemetery, standing alone by Thomas's grave. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "The money. What Thomas said about using it." Eleanor turned to face him. "And there's a music program at Sophie's school. Underfunded. They can barely afford instruments." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I want to fix that. In Theodore's name." That would mean accepting the legacy. That would mean transforming it. Marcus met her eyes. "He tried to destroy me with his fear. I'm going to rebuild with his money. Turn his guilt into something beautiful." Eleanor felt tears prickling. "That sounds like poetry." "It sounds like revenge, but the good kind." She laughed despite herself. "Is there a good kind?" "There is now." They stood in silence, surrounded by graves and the weight of generations. "Thomas was right," Marcus said finally. "About us." Eleanor's heart stuttered. "Marcus, I've been alone for 10 years. I told myself it was because Sophie needed me because I couldn't afford the distraction, but the truth is, I was scared." He took her hand. "I'm still scared, but I'm more scared of losing you than of letting you in." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know what this is. I don't know where it's going, but I want to find out." He squeezed her fingers. "If you do." Eleanor looked at this man, this broken, beautiful, stubborn man, who had lost everything and refused to surrender. Who played Paganini with one arm and raised a daughter with more love than most people experienced in a lifetime. "I do," she said. He smiled. It transformed his face, chasing away the shadows. "Then let's figure it out together." 6 months later, Ashford Symphony Hall was packed. Every seat was filled. People lined the walls. The mayor was there. Critics from every major publication. Musicians who had heard rumors and came to see for themselves. The stage was set for 3 performers. A grand piano. A cello. A single music stand. Backstage, Eleanor was shaking. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." Sophie adjusted her dress. She had grown in the months since her surgery, taller, stronger, more confident. The pale girl in the hospital bed was gone, replaced by a fierce young woman with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. "I haven't played publicly in 30 years. So Dad hasn't played publicly in 15. He's terrified too. Your father is a genius. So are you." Sophie grabbed Eleanor's hands. "Listen to me. I've heard you practice. I've heard you work through pieces until your fingers bled. You're ready. What if I mess up? Then you mess up. So what music isn't about perfection. It's about connection." Sophie grinned. "Dad taught me that." The stage manager appeared. 5 minutes. Sophie hugged Eleanor quickly. "See you out there." She bounded toward the stage wings. Eleanor watched her go, marveling at the girl's energy. A hand touched her shoulder. "Marcus." "Ready." "No." "Good. Neither am I." He was holding the Stradivarius case. The instrument had been professionally restored in the months since Eleanor gave it back to him. It gleamed like it had in Theodore's day. "What if we fail?" "Then we fail spectacularly in front of everyone who ever doubted us." Marcus smiled. "Sounds perfect to me." Eleanor laughed. You're insane. You're just figuring that out. The stage manager returned. 2 minutes. Marcus held out his hand. Together. Eleanor took it. Together. They walked to the stage wings where Sophie was waiting. She was bouncing on her heels, cello in hand, practically vibrating with excitement. "This is it," she whispered. "This is really it." Scared? Marcus asked. Terrified, thrilled, both. Sophie looked at her father, then at Eleanor. "Thank you for making this happen." "You made it happen," Eleanor said. "We're just along for the ride." The house lights dimmed. The audience fell silent. Marcus stepped onto the stage first. The applause was thunderous. People rose to their feet before he played a single note. They had seen the video. They knew the story. They were here to witness the return of a legend. He waited at the music stand, violin ready, until the ovation faded. Then Eleanor walked out. The applause rippled with surprise. The CEO of Ashford Symphony Hall playing piano at her own concert. It was unprecedented, scandalous, wonderful. She sat at the Steinway, the same instrument she had destroyed at age 12, rebuilt and restored in the decades since, and placed her fingers on the keys. Finally, Sophie entered. 14 years old, heart surgery survivor, the prodigy daughter of a prodigy father. She settled into her chair, cello positioned, bow raised. The audience held its breath. Marcus nodded to Eleanor. Eleanor nodded to Sophie. And they began. The piece was called One Hand Full Heart. Marcus had finished composing it in the weeks after Thomas's death. It was dedicated to Sophie, to Eleanor, to Theodore, to Margaret, to everyone who had loved and lost and found a way to keep going. It started with the piano. Simple chords, hesitant searching. Eleanor's fingers trembled, but she forced them steady. This was for Sophie, for Marcus, for herself. The violin joined next. Marcus played with his modified technique, his single arm working the bow with impossible grace. The sound was rich, full alive with everything he had been through. Finally, the cello. Sophie's melody wove through the other instruments like a thread of gold, connecting them, completing them. Together they created something none of them could have made alone. The music built and built, passing through movements that evoked loss and hope and struggle and triumph. There were moments of dissonance passages where the instruments seemed to fight each other, and there were moments of perfect harmony where three separate voices became one. The final movement was a duet between violin and cello, father and daughter, playing together for the first time in public. Sophie matched her father, note for note, phrase for phrase. She had inherited his gift. She had surpassed his expectations. When the last note faded, the audience sat in stunned silence. Then someone began to clap. It spread like wildfire. One person, then 10, then 100, then the entire hall on its feet, roaring their approval. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. People were crying. Critics were scribbling notes. The mayor was wiping his eyes. Eleanor stood at the piano, overwhelmed. Sophie ran to her father and threw her arms around him. "We did it, Dad! We really did it!" Marcus held his daughter tight, his face buried in her hair. When he looked up, his eyes found Eleanor. She walked to them slowly. The audience was still cheering, still celebrating, but it felt distant now. Background noise to the moment unfolding between the three of them. "Thank you," Marcus said. "For what?" "For seeing me. For believing in us. For giving Sophie her dream." Eleanor reached for his hand. Sophie grabbed the other. "Family," Sophie declared. "That's what we are now, whether you like it or not." Marcus laughed. Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. "I like it," she said. The reception afterward was a blur of handshakes and congratulations and business cards pressed into Eleanor's hands. The concert had been a triumph. Critics were calling it the event of the decade. Recordings were already being discussed. A documentary was proposed. Eleanor smiled and nodded and said all the right things. But her mind was elsewhere. She found Marcus on the roof of the Symphony Hall, standing where she had first heard him play. The city spread below them, glittering with a million lights. Escaping the party. Needing a moment, he turned to face her. It's strange. I spent 15 years dreaming of this. Returning to the stage, playing for a real audience. And now that it's happened, I don't know what to do next. You keep playing, you teach, you raise your daughter. Eleanor moved to stand beside him. You live. Is it that simple? Nothing is simple, but some things are worth the complication. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Eleanor's heart stopped. Before you panic, he said quickly, this isn't what you think. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not a diamond, but a small antique piece with a musical note engraved on the band. It was Margaret's, he explained. Sophie's mother. She wore it every day of our marriage. Marcus, I can't. Let me finish. He took a breath. I'm not proposing. Not yet. We're not there yet. But I want you to have this. As a promise. A promise of what? That we'll figure this out. Together. That whatever comes next, the good, the bad, the complicated, we'll face it side by side. He met her eyes. That I won't hide anymore. And neither will you. Eleanor looked at the ring. At Marcus. At the city below them, full of strangers living their own complicated lives. Yes, she said. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Now can I panic? Only if I can panic with you. He kissed her then, gentle and fierce, and full of everything they hadn't said. The city lights blurred. The noise of the party faded. For one perfect moment there was only the two of them, and the promise of what came next. When they finally pulled apart, Sophie was standing in the doorway, grinning like a cat with a canary. Told you, she said triumphantly. I told you this would happen. I called it months ago. Yes, you did, Marcus admitted. So when's the wedding? We're not yet, Eleanor interrupted. But someday. Sophie's grin widened. Good, because I already have opinions about the flowers. She disappeared back into the party, leaving Marcus and Eleanor alone again. She's going to be impossible, Marcus said. She already is. That's what we love about her. Marcus laughed. It was a real laugh, full and warm, and completely unguarded. So what happens now? He asked. Eleanor thought about her grandfather's letters, about Thomas's final words, about the concert they had just given, and the life they were building together. Now, she said, we write the next movement. 1 year later, the Marcus Chen Music Foundation opened its doors. It was housed in a renovated warehouse near Sophie's old school, transformed into studios and practice rooms, and a small concert hall. Children from underprivileged backgrounds could learn instruments for free. Young musicians with medical challenges could receive support and accommodations. Teachers who had been overlooked by traditional institutions could share their gifts. Theodore Ashford's guilt money had become something beautiful. The opening ceremony was small, just family and friends and a few journalists who had been following the story. Sophie played a piece she had composed herself. Marcus gave a speech about second chances. Eleanor cut the ribbon with tears in her eyes. Afterward, they stood in the empty concert hall, just the three of them. Mom would have loved this, Sophie said. Yes, Marcus agreed. She would have. And Grandpa Theodore. Sophie looked at Eleanor. What would he have thought? Eleanor considered the question. I think he would have been jealous, proud, furious that someone did what he never could. She smiled. And eventually, after he finished sulking, he would have been grateful. Grateful for what? For being wrong, for having his legacy redeemed by the people he hurt most. Sophie nodded slowly. That's poetic. It's justice, Marcus corrected. Can't it be both? They walked out of the hall together into a future that held more questions than answers, more challenges than certainties. more possibilities than any of them could imagine. But they walked together, father and daughter and the woman who had become family. And behind them in the empty concert hall the echo of music lingered. Not a ghost, but a promise. Not an ending, but a beginning. Some songs take years to write. Some stories take decades to tell. But the music always remains. And this music, the music of loss and love and second chances, would play forever in the hearts of everyone who heard it. Because that's what music does. It endures. It transforms. It heals. And in the end, it sets us free.